Part 1.
Sherlock Holmes did not like aimless physical exercise, but one spring day I persuaded him to go for a walk with me in the park. We walked for 2 hours, and it was almost 5 when we returned to Baker Street.
"I beg your pardon, sir,"
said our page boy as we entered.
"There was a man waiting for you. He was a very restless gentleman. He walked all around the room saying, 'Isn't Mr. Holmes going to return?' Finally, he left."
You see,
Holmes said to me.
I needed a case, and now I have lost this one because we went for a walk in the park. Hello? That's not your pipe on the table? Well, that man must have a very big problem, because he left his pipe. It is obvious that he likes this particular pipe very much.
"How do you know that he likes it very much?" I asked.
Well,
explained Holmes,
I think this pipe costs around 7 6 Now, look, it has been mended twice with silver bands that probably cost more than the pipe itself. So this man must like his pipe very much, if he prefers to mend it instead of buying a new one with the same money.
Just then, as Holmes was talking, we heard someone walking up the stairs, and then a man walked into the room without knocking.
"I beg your pardon,"
said the man.
"I should have knocked, but I am very upset, and I need help."
The man then took off his hat and sat down on a chair.
"My dear Mr. Grant Munro,"
began Holmes. Our visitor jumped from his chair.
"What?"
he cried.
"You know my name?"
"If you want to preserve your incognito,"
said Holmes, smiling,
"then you should not write your name on the inside of your hat, or else you should turn the inside of your hat away from the person whom you are addressing."
"I have been married for 3 years, and my wife and I were very happy until last Monday. But, Mr. Holmes, I am sure that my wife loves me."
"Please let me have the facts, Mr. Munro,"
said Holmes with some impatience.
Effie, my wife, was a young widow, only 25 years old when I met her. After this tragedy, she decided to leave America and come back to England to live with her aunt. I should also mention that her husband left her a large amount of money. There is an inn and 2 houses near our house, and a single cottage across the field in front of our house. Until this recent incident, my wife and I lived very happily there. There is one more thing I should tell you. When we married, my wife put all her money in my name. Well, about 6 weeks ago, she came and asked me for some.
"Jack,"
she said,
"when you took my money, you said that if I ever wanted some, I should just ask you."
"Certainly," I said. "It's your money. It may have nothing to do with what happened afterwards, but I thought that I should mention it. Anyway, I told you that there is a cottage near our house. Well, I like walking past that cottage, and last Monday, as I walked past the cottage, I saw an empty van going away from the cottage and furniture in front of the cottage. Someone was finally going to live there. I was looking at the cottage when suddenly I saw a face watching me from an upper window. I told her that I was her neighbour and asked her if she needed any help.
"If we need any help, we'll call you,"
she said, and shut the door in my face. That night I did not tell my wife about the strange face and the rude woman, but I did tell her that people were now living in the cottage. That same night, something strange happened. In the middle of the night, when I was not completely asleep, I became aware that my wife was dressed and was leaving the room. What was my wife hiding from me? The next day I had to go to the city, but I was so worried about my wife that I returned early to Norbury at about 1 o'clock. As I stood there, imagine my surprise, Mr. Holmes, when the door suddenly opened and my wife walked out.
Oh, Jack!
I'm going to enter the cottage and discover the truth,
Please don't go in, Jack!
she cried. I discovered that my wife had been to the cottage again, so I went to the cottage. I walked into the house and found no one. But upstairs I found a comfortable room, and on the mantelpiece stood a full-length photograph of my wife. That is why I didn't find anyone there. When I saw my wife again, I told her that there could be no peace between us until she told me the truth.
Then he said,
Are you sure that the yellow face was a man's face?
Each time I saw it,
he replied.
I saw it from a distance, so I am not sure.
When did your wife ask you for the money?
Asked Holmes.
Almost 2 months ago.
Have you ever seen a photograph of her first husband?
No, there was a great fire in Atlanta after her husband's death, and all her papers were destroyed.
And yet she had a death certificate. Have you ever seen it?
Yes, she got a duplicate after the fire.
Have you ever met anyone who knew your wife in America?
No,
Has she ever talked about visiting America again?
no,
Has she ever received letters from there?
no, I don't think so.
Thank you.
Concluded Holmes.
Now, go back to Norbury, and when you see that those people have returned to the cottage, call us. Part 2.
Then Mr. Grant Munro left, and Holmes and I discussed the case.
Upon my word, Watson, there is something very attractive about that yellow face at the window, and I would not miss this case for worlds.
Have you got a theory? I asked.
Yes.
Holmes replied.
I think her first husband is in the cottage. They write to her and tell her to send them £100, or they will tell her new husband everything. When her husband tells her that someone is living in the cottage, she knows that they are her blackmailers. In the middle of the night, while her husband is sleeping, she decides to go to the cottage. Fortunately for her, her maid warns her that her husband is coming, and she and her blackmailers leave the house in time. Now we can do nothing except wait for Mr. Munro to call us, and then we will see if my theory is correct.
We did not have to wait long. When we arrived there, Holmes asked Mr. Munro if he was sure he wanted to enter the cottage. In one corner there was a desk, and at that desk there appeared to be a little girl. Her face was turned away from us when we entered the room, but we could see she was wearing a red dress and long white gloves. Holmes, with a laugh, put his hand behind the ear of the little girl and pulled off the mask, and there was a little coal-black girl. She laughed, and I laughed too, but Grant Munro stood staring with his hand holding his throat.
My God!
He cried.
What does this mean?
I will tell you everything.
Cried his wife with a proud face.
My child survived.
Your child?
Cried Grant Munro. She pulled out a locket, and inside the locket was the picture of a very handsome and intelligent man, but a man who was obviously of African descent.
This is John Hebron of Atlanta,
said Mrs. Munro.
and he was a very noble man. She's very dark, but she is my dear little girl.
When the little girl heard these words, she ran to her mother.
I left her in America with a trusted servant,
Mrs. Munro continued.
because she was not very healthy, but I never considered abandoning her.
He lifted the little child, kissed her, and with the little girl in his arms, he gave his other hand to his wife.
We can talk it over more comfortably at home,
He said.
I am not a very good man, Effie, but I think that I am better than you thought.
We all left the cottage together, and then Holmes and I returned to London. We did not say another word about the case until late that night at Holmes's house in Baker Street, just before Holmes went to bed.
"Watson,"
He said,
"if you should ever think that I am becoming too confident in my powers, or that I am not working hard enough on a particular case, please whisper Norbury in my ear, and I will be infinitely obliged to you."
Thank you for watching this video. Please like, share and subscribe to the channel to see the latest videos. Thank you.